Good evening. Good afternoon. This is O'Shea Linux coming to you with a new game this time. Well, it's not so much a game. It's a walking simulation. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy it. So now this is not some fast pace. It's not some fast paced thing. It's just basically you're just walking. And it's the director's cut, so you're gonna hear other people talking. But sit back, get your little popcorn, all that good stuff, and just enjoy yourself. Leave me a comment, talk to me. Don't forget to hit that like button. So this is one of those slow games. We're just walking. Let me turn down the music a little bit. What? Closed caption, large caption, disable. Let's do some closed caption enable. I'll turn it down just a little bit. All right, here we go. Look around, beautiful stuff, beautiful. You can go in the water a little bit. But that's all you see when you go in the water. Nothing. Hey, thank you for the like. I'm just relaxing before the Sabbath kick in, just enjoying this Dear Esther game. It's more of a scenic walking thing. Just walk around and enjoy the beautiful scenery. No killing, no any of that stuff, so it might disappoint some of you all.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Pinchbeck, I'm the creative director of The Chinese Room, and this is the...
Hold up, I do not want that. Let me turn subtitle off.
Dear Esther Developers Commentary.
Hi, I'm Rob Briscoe. I'm the artist on Dear Esther.
And I'm Jessica Curry, and I was...
Give me a second, people. I thought I turned the closed caption, turned it off. Okay.
the composer on the game.
So what you're looking at today is a remake of a mod. Dear Esther started off in 2007 as a Half-Life 2 mod that did really, really well in the modding community, which was fantastic, and as a result of that attracted the attention of Rob, who worked as the primary developer on a Source remake of the game that was released in 2012. And this year is another remake where it's been updated for a cross-platform release, and we wanted to add in this developer's commentary just to give you a bit more of an insight into some of the ideas behind the game as it came together.
Oh, good. Now we got the writing out of the way. Thank you for hitting that like button once again. I appreciate that. Drop me a comment in the chat. We'll sit here and dibble-dabble a little bit as we go through this thing. But we can just be quiet and enjoy our time.
So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined
Ew.
with the VOs and the music and stuff. I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of laid in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
Now, if y'all want to, y'all can actually go and get this too if you want to. It's really enjoyable to play. Now here's the deal with it. I don't know if it's free or not. I don't remember if I bought it or if it was one of those free games.
So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of laid in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
I know y'all done heard this man talk 3 times, but I forgot to look at the
So you'll
chimney.
see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of laid in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
I didn't know I could walk across there. Cause last time I don't think I could, or did I try? I didn't try, but here's what I can do. Watch this. Cause I don't want y'all to miss anything. I don't want y'all to miss anything. Okay. So y'all didn't miss anything. Okay. So first I'm gonna start downhill.
Part of the point about the whole game, I think, was this idea that rather than having a linear, straight through version of the story, that we could have multiple story units for each place you were. And I was really interested in this idea of how you can open up that space that people can interpret. So I loved the idea that you could have 2 people that played this game and then would have a conversation about it, and one of them would say, oh, what did you think about when this happened? And the other person would be like, well, that didn't happen for me. I had a completely different event happen or a completely different story happen. And it kind of feels very gamey in that way, that actually one of the things I love about writing for games is that you hand over so much control to the player that it becomes their story, and that's really, really important rather than trying to force them. So using randomised blocks of voiceover in the game and the kind of randomised prop details that Rob was talking about means that it gives it a really different feeling every time you go through. And that's kind of interesting for me, because I like the idea of going, well, not everyone has to have the same experience, and because it's interactive, you have the capacity to have very different experiences occupying the same space. So yeah, but balancing all that then becomes an absolute nightmare.
I think it's nice though because everybody gets a personal experience. Like I love reading the forums and seeing how people come and they sort of tell their story and what they interpreted of it, and then you see other people discussing what they thought of it. And to me, it's kind of nice because everybody takes something unique away from it.
When I wrote the music for the mod of Dear Esther, there was absolutely no budget whatsoever for live players, so all the music was sampled. But one of the good things about that is it actually forced me to be quite creative about how I wrote the music. So with my background in sound art, I wanted to use samples in a different way that wasn't just using it to sound like a violin. I wanted to time stretch and manipulate samples to make something different and strange and quite unique. But then when we got the Indie Fund money, I had the amazing opportunity to re-record the music with live players. And that was so exciting for me actually, because that's where it comes to life. And I thought long and hard about whether to write new music, going from the mod to the commercial version, but actually I decided that my initial and original emotional response to the game was probably going to be the strongest response and reaction that I had. So I just literally, the music that I'd written for samples, I then wrote out for live instruments. But what they bring to it is transformative actually. And I think The Beach is a really good example of this, where you have these awful samples soaring away, and then you have the string quartet playing this very bleak, very sparse music, and they bring the presence of the island immediately to it, and it comes to life.
This symbol on the beach, which is the golden ratio, it's one of the only things that's really left explicitly from the mod. In the original mod, there was an awful lot of more kind of symbols and kind of a much more kind of mystical, sort of magical element to the island. There was a lot of very weird stuff in there. And a lot of them came out of the commercial version because they felt like they were a little bit explicit. And instead, there's a lot more hidden kind of codes and symbols in there. There's still some stuff which you can only actually see or experience if you are not playing the game, if you're looking at it from editor. We had in the original mods things like trees planted to mirror the shape of the M5, or there's a whole bunch of things that are there to represent star clusters and all kinds of things like that. And we'll probably talk a bit more about kind of like hidden details and the secrets in the game as we go through. But that was really interesting for us in terms of the design of it, of going, you've got your conscious, explicit play experience, but games are always constantly manipulating your mood and your feelings and the decisions you're making. And so really trying to create a space that had all of these kind of subliminals in it was a really interesting thing that we wanted to do, both with the original, and then I think it got lifted up into a much more sophisticated version when we went to the commercial, because Rob's able to bring that sort of level of artistry to the visuals that really got that kind of sense of hidden meaning in there. And that was really important, given how kind of complex and symbol heavy and poetic the story is, where a lot of it doesn't actually make any sense, but it's...
So something I wanted to do as an artist was create some kind of reward for the player when they explore the island. There are some areas of the game where it's a little bit more quieter, there's no music or there's no voiceovers. So I kind of wanted to create a bit of an incentive for people to explore. And you'll find around the island that these kind of like random scattered items that are usually slightly out of place from the environment themselves, but in another aspect they actually bring a little bit of story to the island itself, usually to the island or to the actual protagonists or the characters that surround it. So you'll find that around the island these little props and stuff. Just keep your eye out for it if you're exploring.
Everything about Esther for me is a dream. The landscape is not an island, it's the dream of an island. The music is like music that you've you wake up because you've heard in your sleep, but you're not conscious of hearing it. And the language in the story was supposed to be like that as well. Of it didn't matter the sense it made; it was more about the kind of the shapes it created, if that makes sense. So the words would kind of were like being in water, like listening to something underwater would be this very dreamlike, symbolic, poetic thing. And it always frustrated me in games with game writing. This has really changed quite a lot. There's never any space for poetic language. It's very exposition-y, very descriptive, very direct. And you'd have like art and audio would have these amazing creative spaces they could explore. But when it came down to actually writing, you just had to basically go into the room, describe the character, tell the player what to do. And it just seemed like the most boring thing you could do with words in a game. And why couldn't a writer have the same artistic freedom as a visual artist or an audio designer or a musician in terms of being able to say, isn't this just about creating this kind of emotional tone, this emotional space? And it's... So people have asked why the Dear Esther's set on a Hebridean island. What's really interesting about this is one of those times when your kind of aspirations as an artist and the practical realities kind of dovetail. We knew we had to have some way of limiting the player from disappearing off the play space. And when we made the original, it was a mod, and because it was a Half-Life 2 mod, you kind of had Eastern European city, spaceship, or blasted, desolate landscape. We had 3 options if you didn't want to start making any other assets. So it started off with these practical constraints. We don't want to set it on a spaceship, we don't want to set it in an Eastern European city, so it's got to be on this kind of like this desolate landscape. And we want to limit the player, so an island seems like a natural choice. And it's really interesting how you start from that. And we had this big lump of clay on the table that we were carving out parts and things to annoy the cleaners and things like that.
One of the things you're always trying to do as a composer is create memorable themes. And a slight confession is that probably the most memorable theme, which is Remember in Dear Esther, wasn't actually created for the game. Rob's looking shocked. So it was actually from a piece of choral music that I'd written years before, based on a Christina Rossetti poem called Remember. And one of the things I was talking about earlier was how I didn't have any budget. So I had this piece of choral music, and I thought, hang on, this is absolutely perfect for Esther, but I don't want to use all of it. So the only bit that you actually get in the game is the first line of the choral piece of music. But that actually went on to form the main theme of the music that I wrote. And I think for me it's really interesting about how things that you've written earlier, years before, sometimes come in really, really useful and fit. So I always tell people and students not to despair if something doesn't get used or doesn't work at the time, because actually there'll come a place or in a time where you think, hang on a minute, I've got something that fits. So in terms of that memorable theme,
White Lines.
Yeah.
They actually did this. It was really cool. I found this historical document. They used to do this on Boré and the Hebrides. If their disease broke out, they'd actually chip out and expose the chalk. So if you were on a boat and you were coming to the island, you'd know not to land because it was infectious, which is the coolest, most amazing. One of those things where you go, it's almost impossible as a writer to come up with something as cool as that. It just has to be something that was actually done. And it's so sad as well. And I love this bit and the fact that we can do it because it feels really real because it references a real thing. And like, I know there's something really special about that, but it was always one of those bits in the game that I thought, we've got to be able to represent this somehow. We have to be able to get these things in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I actually didn't know that was actually based historically in real life, but that's really cool. Because my thing about the White Lines is that it was this completely surreal thing, but also it was kind of, it just added to the landscape. It's like, whoa, what the hell is that? And putting that into the game was kind of challenging because to me it just seemed like, oh, it's going to be really hard to pull off in a way that's kind of realistic. But then when you look at the kind of art style of the game, it's not really a realistic thing. Like everything is half imagined. So in that way it kind of really fit into the landscape and it kind of creates this amazing sort of landmark that you see in the environment, and I just find it really interesting to hear about that. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's not a realistic place. And I mean, no game is a realistic place anyway, but one of those things where understanding that you're making something which isn't real and you have that kind of capacity to be sort of.
Something that I wanted to bring through in the art of the game was the same kind of fidelity that you find in both Jessica's music and Dan's writing. In the same kind of way that you have all of these little details, these very close attentions to detail that kind of really bring richness to the story. And something that was missing in the original mod version was just this lack of a visual layer of story.
There's a scene in Donnie Darko where Drew Barrymore's playing his English teacher, and she talks about Celador as being the most beautiful word in the English language, and about it's the sound of the words together. And Dear Esther actually comes from the introduction to From a Faith No More song, the Crab song on the first album, Introduce Yourself. And there's a point where, I think it's Chuck at that point as the vocalist before Mike Patton, just says, Dear Esther. And it really lodged with me because the sound Dear Esther just has a really amazing sound to it. And I think when we started making it, and the idea of it being this series of letters to someone came through, it just came straight back out of going, that's just a really beautiful sounding combination of words. And I think that really
One of the things that's been most commented on with the audio and the music in Dear Esther is how sparse it is. And that was a really deliberate tactic. I wanted to leave room for the player to think and to dream and to wonder and to put their own interpretation into what was happening. And I think the problem with so much modern media is how bombarded we are constantly. It's the kind of MTV, flash in your face, constant music. And Dan and I watch a lot of drama together, and there really is constant music.
Which is constantly telling you what you should feel, like really clearly, and it's like being kind of beaten up by the music sometimes.
And when you read a lot of reviews of Dear Esther, a lot of people say they had this time to think and to interpret, and that was one of their favourite things, that they placed themselves so directly into the game, and it's their experience. And I think that's actually the greatest success of the game on all points, from the story to Rob's art to the music, is we all left space for the player to dream.
Mm-hmm.
When I was originally thinking about how to write the music for the game, I suddenly realised that you don't see anybody in the game, and the most important character as such is the island itself. So one of the things that I did with the music was to write the island as if she or he were a character in its own right. And that's really important, I think, that you're going through this space and actually it's completely devoid of people. but the music in a way populates the island, and that the voice of the island speaks to you through the music.
Which is interesting, because I think that's really come on in terms of later games we've done, that sowed the seeds for the way in which we approach music in Rapture, where it was very specifically the voice of characters. A Machine for Pigs as well, where the music was about being Lily's voice in the game, Lily's representation in the game. So it's interesting how, looking back on Esther, a lot of those kind of ideas were tried out here that then came on to take other forms in stuff we've done since.
Hey, whenever you come in and you see this, be so kind and hit that like button for me. It'll take you a second to do it. And if you haven't already subscribed, subscribe.
So something you'll notice as you look around the environment is, from a distance you see the landscape is kind of a beautiful place in some ways, but something I wanted to bring to the game is that there's this second layer beneath the surface. Whereas if you look at things closely, you see that the actual island itself is very polluted. It's kind of very rotten. Everywhere you look, every rock, every grass surface, it has this layer of filth on it, and it's kind of been put in there just to kind of emphasize further that this island's a really unpleasant place to live. It's like if you scratch the surface, you see like just how corrupt this island is.
Do you?
We cast and did all the voice direction for Esther ourselves for the mod, and it was basically Jess and I on a casting website just listening to people's show reels and finding what's the voice of this thing. And there was never any question about Nigel. I think we heard his show reel for the first time around. It's probably been listened to sort of 30 or 40 actors, and we started listening to his show reel and just both looked at each other and went, that's it, that's him. And it was amazing when Nigel came in. We had, I think, a day and a half to do the whole thing. And he just did that amazing thing that really, really great actors did. If he just walked in, got in front of the microphone, and more or less did the entire thing in one take. And we did hardly any retakes on anything. It just felt like his instinct for the character in the game was so strong that he just, without virtually any direction, just came in and just got it. And one of the hardest things with the voiceover that we did was when we went from a mod which had 3 potential narrative units per queue to 4 potential narrative units per queue, was not only finding new bits of writing that kind of complemented and played off what was there in the original mod, but for Nigel to come back in, nearly 5 years later, and to just re-find that voice in exactly the same way and deliver it in a way that fitted in and complemented it was a real testament to his ability as an actor, I think. That apart from we had spent quite a lot of time trying to make the sound actually sound the same in terms of mic placement and things like that, but in terms of the actual delivery of those new monologues, you wouldn't know that was both written and acted sort of 4.5 years after the original thing was done. So the one person who's not in the room sort of today but deserves a huge amount of credit for how the game kind of eventually was delivered, but also I think in terms of how the game has lasted, a huge amount of respect needs to go to Nigel Carrington for his work on it.
Ooh, License didn't think I can get back up that hill. But this thing is just filled with so many places to explore. Just so many places, so many things to do. Y'all would get if you just like one of them easy, relaxing type deals, this is one of them to get. This is one to get.
Inside the bothy, there is a randomised chance that you can find an ultrasound picture on the table, and I think it's the one instance of randomisation in the game that is like the pinnacle of it, because the idea that Esther was pregnant when she died changes everything emotionally about how you understand the story. I'm not saying you don't care as much if you don't find it, but it just adds this other layer of just the ground falls away from it. The first time I saw it, and the meaning of the crash in Esther's death just means so much more when you go, it's not just about her, there was an unborn child here. And I think that's where the randomisation just hits its absolute peak, because it's one tiny detail that may or may not be there. But if it's there, it's going to fundamentally change the way you feel about the entire thing. And that's the strength that the randomisation elements in Esther kind of provide, that you go, your likely kind of feeling about the story and your understanding about the story can be changed so absolutely by the occurrence or not of one tiny little prop detail. And that's something which, those moments I think are what make it really, really special. So it's for me, it's almost like the most important prop in the game, because when it happens, it's so profound.
Yeah, and it's again, it's just something that makes each playthrough more personal. I think this is what I love reading about. You know, people finding these things and going, "Holy shit! I've just found this one thing that's going to change it. That's changed
well,
my
I didn't know they
interpretation."
do that kind of
completely."
cursing in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pardon me, people, they didn't know they were gonna come out with that. Have I went in this building before? I'm trying to let y'all see as much of it. Anything on this side? I don't think there's anything. Go watch me some. No. Roof caved in. Alright, yeah, there was a. I know some of y'all noticed that there was another place to go around here. Huh. Is there a place? Oh, if we're behind these rocks, nah. Let me make sure. No, there's no path. Looks like there'll be a path through there though. I believe the rocks stopped me. Yeah, it's not meant to go that way. In a few minutes, I think I'm gonna get off it once I get to another little spot. But I'm pretty sure there's something I done missed in here. But then there'll be y'all chance to get it and see where it goes from there. Huh. No, I don't want
So one of the things that influenced the visuals quite a lot was the tech limitations at the time, and also the kind of themes of the game. Like tech-wise,
But
we
just let me go.
were
Just
never
let me
ever
go all the
gonna
way.
kind of achieve photorealism, and I think that was a good thing. I mean, really, it made us sort of stretch out into other areas, and for me as an artist, it kind of made me think a little bit more creatively. I did a few tests at the beginning, and when I realised this wasn't possible, I kind of went.
We should probably talk about some of the inspirations behind it. I'm on a strict you don't talk about Stalker kind of thing going on here. And when Rob and I started talking, I think one of the first things that we kind of discovered was how much we're both obsessed with Stalker.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the major things behind it in terms of when people talk about game inspirations. I mean, for me, there's a lot of FPS stuff in there, Doom, System Shock, but I think Stalker probably more than anything else. And Roadside Picnic, the Strugatsky novel that Stalker's based on, of the idea of this incredible space that you didn't understand, that's simultaneously beautiful and threatening. And I think sort of Tarkovsky's kind of films kind of play into that as well, his version of Stalker, that you want to have this place that you feel rather than think about. And for me, that was like really kind of core to all of the inspirations for the game, was this is a space that is about feeling, not thinking.
Yeah, I think the movies in particular, I think I hadn't watched the movies. I'd read the book and I played the game, but when I watched the movie, it kind of all made sense to me, like why I like the game so much and why I like the story. It's just like every shot is like a painting. It's like every shot has its story to tell. There's very little dialogue in the actual movie itself. There's just these long lingering shots, and that each shot is amazingly beautiful and in its kind of desolation. And for me, that was like a huge influence, you know, like trying to bring some of that through into the environments. So that is definitely something I'm going to struggle not to talk about. But the game as well, I'd say the actual Stalker game has a big place in my heart. Like gaming wise, it's one of the reasons I got into game art in the first place.
Yeah.
So that to me is a big part of it too.
I walked on all this stuff and didn't even realize it. Okay. One cave down. No, I'm not gonna walk over that. I just want it sometimes let it get a little quiet and just enjoy it. This is beautiful. And I think you all, so here's where I'm going to stop it. We'll pick it up again another day, Lord willing. Look, I appreciate y'all coming in and enjoying this with me. And I'm going to bid y'all a good night. I'm going to go check out me some YouTube stuff. Dear Easter, the Landmark Edition. And I'm signing out.